in the CCAC. It's make these trajectories. It's part of the national NDC for Mexico as well. Circular economy, and as well the things that what is the potential of the mitigation doing with this kind of model. Modeling is one of the things that CCAC is supporting to the countries. Other is the evaluation of the sites. It's not easy. Yucatan Peninsula is not, they don't have ground specifically, it's directly the rocks. And then if you do something there, you can go directly through the water, the deep water, and it's a big problem there. It's not an easy way to work with the waste in that area. Following the meetings with the municipal authorities, it's important to involve the subnational governments and improve the comprehensive waste management to the strategies. And the last one is the estimation of the co-benefits. One of the things that we're working as well in the CCC is the multiple benefits of the actions in terms of health, in terms of climate change, in terms of air quality. And we all integrate them in this proposal that has been approved. Well, the last one, and very important in terms of the COP. One of the things that we have happened currently is the effects of the climate change. Otis, probably you hear about that, is its impact directly to the Mexico area, in specific to the Guerrero, Acapulco, is amazing because it started like in a storm, and just in 8 hours changed from storm, tropical storm, to hurricane category 5. It was amazing, the destruction in that area. So that's the things that are happening currently with the climate change. So what happened, looks the imagine, so it started the situation in Mexico in terms of the impacts of the hurricanes increased, because it's more now, the category is more than 3 to 5 that is impacting to Mexico than in the past, because it's the climate change. So one of the things that we happen, and we are measurement in Mexico, is how is the raising the temperatures in the country, how the sea level is raising as well, and the reduction of the precipitation. So we need to understand what is the next step. Obviously, we need to do actions in terms of the waste. Now we have a problem, a real problem. After the Otis passed through Acapulco, there's a lot of destruction. They have a lot of waste that you cannot imagine. All the city is completely destroyed. And we have thinking about what is the best way to put the waste. So we are talking about the prevention, but now we need to talk about adaptation of the waste. So we need to put in the table the adaptation in terms of the waste is important, because we are not prepared for put all this waste in some part of the Acapulco. So it's coming of organic waste, but as well solid waste. So what happened, if you have if you can see images in the newspapers, all the waste is in the streets. Now it's changed, we are working now currently, but the people start to burning because it start to smell. Okay, we are not prepared what happened with this kind of situation. So probably for the tropical areas, it's very important to highlight and make the pathways, the properly pathways to do something in terms of what happened with the hurricanes. So, and that's the things we are doing. With the support, this one in the Otis, it will be supported by the CCAC as well. And from Canada, the Commission Environmental Cooperation that is here as well, we are doing a strategy to support these actions for helping to the people in Acapulco. Thank you very much.
So much. Thank you, Mr. Abraham. I think this is one of the very unique examples of addressing mitigation and adaptation both at the same time, and linking waste management with hurricane protection and prevention. I think it's a very unique example. We can see how climate change is encompassing everything we are doing in our lives, in our societies, in our economies. And this is an excellent example of what we call preventive action, a plan of action to prevent and really ensure solid waste management takes place despite of challenges being posed by a storm which become Hurricane 5 category very soon in 8 hours. Very unique examples. I think only once you are in Mexico, you have to experience this to really believe it, that it can happen. Thank you so much. Now, coming from the country level action plan, we go back to international level once again. International cooperation, international coalitions, international partnerships are the key when we want to address methane emissions from solid waste management. And there's one unique organization at international level, which is International Solid Waste Association, which is really doing a very important job, bringing all national level associations as well as global coalitions together to address solid waste management issues at different levels. And in that, I'm very happy that we have the president of International Solid Waste Association, Mr. Carlos Silva Filho. Carlos is a colleague from Brazil, very, very pleasant country for me also personally, and where, even if he's coming from Brazil, which is of course a vast country, having so many multiple challenges like any other country, but he's heading it at a different zones, different regions, this International Solid Waste Association, which is really helping to move forward on some of the issues we are talking today on the waste management, waste to energy. Of course, we are talking about biofertilizer and above all, methane gas emission reduction. Carlos is an accomplished attorney at law with specialization in administrative, governance, and economic regulation. His expertise in waste and resource management is recognized on a global scale as he serves as a member of the United Nations Secretary General's Advisory Board on Zero Waste, and of course participates in a number of key issues. We are really addressing the solid waste management. Carlos, given your experience and your, of course, position as the president of International Solid Waste Association, what is the key role waste and resource management sector? It's very interesting. They are not looking at waste in isolation. They link it with the resource management, which is part of a circular economy. Very important, please remember that, because these are where we have to break the silos between these two important topics. Can play to tackle reduction in greenhouse gases and fulfill pledges on methane on the table. Carlos, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's a pleasure to be here this afternoon, joining this initiative. And I must really acknowledge our gratitude to the World Biogas Association, to Charlotte, Julia, and the whole team for putting this event together. As you mentioned, collaboration is key, partnership is key. Otherwise, we won't be able to tackle the triple planetary crisis. A crisis of pollution, of biodiversity loss, and climate change. We are very proud, very honored to be here at COP28 with the first ever Waste and Resources Pavilion at the Conference of the Parties. This pavilion is aiming to amplify the voice of this sector. It's aiming to really maximize the call that's in the title of this section, that there is no time to waste, that there is a significant link between sound waste management and climate change, that we really need to improve, we need to enhance current practices in order to achieve the goals, the pledges, the commitments that are on the table. Otherwise, we'll be failing not only to mitigate global warming, but we'll be failing to protect the environment, we'll be failing to assist people, and here I emphasize, we'll be failing to assist the most vulnerable people, because the most vulnerable people are the ones who suffer the most when we talk about environmental climate forces. We just heard the Mexican approach, that we really need to think about people instead of just thinking about, let's say, the economy, the products. We need to bring these efforts together. And this is the reason why we brought waste and resources together, because we are not anymore dealing with the end-of-pipe solutions. We cannot be living on a passive role, on a passive position, just waiting for the materials that come to us generated by the society. We really need to take upstream approaches. We really need to leverage our position and work throughout the whole value chain. And here it's important to highlight that despite the perception that waste management contributes for like just minor emissions, greenhouse gases emissions, because according to the fifth assessment report from IPCC, waste corresponds to 3% of the total anthropogenic emissions. We can really, with this perception leads that we cannot mitigate that much. We are restricted to the 3%. But this perception is, I can say, it's wrong. It's on the wrong side. We really need to expand our boundaries. We really need to take our perception to another level, to the level that the cross-cutting effects of sound waste management can mitigate much more greenhouse gases than only the 3% corresponded to the emissions from the waste sector. Because we really need to realize that when we prevent waste generation, we are preventing direct emissions. When we reuse and recycle, we are preventing emissions from the waste sector, and we are preventing and mitigating emissions from many other sectors, because we don't extract natural resources. We replace virgin raw materials. We save energy in terms of the industrial process. So whether the number of the potential mitigation from the waste sector is 15, 20, or 25, we need to calculate. It's important that we reach one single conclusion, that the contribution of sound waste management is key to tackle climate change. In a very recent article we published in the ISO magazine, Waste Management World, authored by Professor David Wilson, and I have the honor to co-author this article together with Aditi Ramola, the technical director of ISVA. We present this concept in the figure that the first two figures on the top show the direct emissions of greenhouse gases from the waste sector using this IPCC definition. And we can see that most than 90% of the waste sector direct contributions is methane. And methane is a short-lived climate force, usually calculated 28 times more potent than CO2. But it's when we consider the 100 years period. And as a short-lived climate force, methane peak in the atmosphere lacks 20 years. And if we consider this period, methane is 80 times more potent than CO2. So we really need to bring these figures to the game. We really need to bring these concepts, the most updated and scientifically based concepts, to the discussion and to the negotiations. Because at the end, we need to recognize the positive effect, the return on investment on climate benefits if we move from the current approach, from the linear approach, to a more circular approach with sound waste and resources management. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Carlos, for very inspiring your presentation on how we should link waste management with the part of with the resource management as part of from linear to circular economy. That's the key. Sound, solid waste management will be the key to address climate change. And because methane, as you highlighted rightly, is 28 times more potent than carbon dioxide. And it's time we should connect the dots of waste management with methane gas reduction, and of course addressing climate change with multiple benefits on health, multiple benefits on clean energy, and of course multiple benefits on economic activities coming out of that. Thank you so much, Carlos. Now I have the pleasure to, connect to our Chief Executive of World Biogas Association, Charlotte Morton. She is also heading both World Biogas Association and ADBA, UK-based Anaerobic Digestion Association. A practicing lawyer for 10 years, Charlotte studied for her MBA at London Business School as a law school before setting up a car club business startup. But of course, later on, she got interested more on the business side of ADBA, which is a UK-based association on anaerobic digestion in UK. And then she really got involved in the bigger global potential of biogas, establishing World Biogas Association in 2016 to promote and increase the rate of uptake of biogas globally. She was awarded an Order of British Empire in 2022 on Queen's birthday, honors for her services to biogas industry. So Charlotte, with these words, let me really welcome for your remarks. Everybody has said in the opening remarks, also I mentioned and Martina mentioned that industry is the key when we talk about potential of waste management linking to biogas potential. How we can bring, if we say that 98% of potential remains untapped so far, how we can really tap into that, and what industry can play, especially biogas industry can play a role in waste management, also linking to biogas production, not only for energy, but also for other economic activities, including biofertilizer and carbon reduction. Charlotte, over to you.
Thank you, Pradeep. And it's great to be back here in Dubai at COP28 to talk about the crucial role that biogas plays in delivering the Global Methane Pledge. We humans, whoops.
I think it's uploading.
Okay. Humans, directly or indirectly, generate over 105 billion tons of organic waste globally, all of which are emitting methane as they break down directly into the atmosphere. So we're talking here about organic wastes from municipal solid waste, animal manures and slurries, wastewater. Combined, these are contributing 21% of global methane emissions generated by human activity. Today, we're focusing on municipal solid waste because it's the greatest source of methane from all organic wastes, as the graph on the left shows. But today, as Pradeep highlighted, only 2% of these organic wastes are being recycled, which means that 98% are out there emitting methane. This has to change. Biogas is a well-established, proven technology that's already widely used around the world and represents a huge opportunity to change the way that we see these wastes. So with biogas, not only are we stopping the methane emissions, but we can also recover the valuable resources all of these wastes contain. So it's an extraordinary circular solution. And as technology, it gets more value out of these wastes than any other technology. And it's a natural process. Indeed, it's the same anaerobic digestion process that all of you use to digest your food. And it's capable of extracting significant value from what we refer to typically as wastes. So firstly, we think about it in a form of energy. And in those organic wastes, there's as much as a third of today's natural gas demand. But biogas can be used for electricity or upgraded to biomethane, also for heat and transport. It's the same molecular content as natural gas, so it's a drop-in substitute. The other significant product from biogas is digestate, which is a natural fertilizer that can help to restore our soils. When organic wastes are sent to landfill, incineration, or energy from waste plants, the nutrients from those organics are lost or become unusable. Biogas instead recycles those nutrients, which are critical for future food production, in the form of biofertilizer digestate. And in the upgrading process also, we're able to capture the bio-CO2, which is originating in the atmosphere. So using bio-CO2 in industries such as the food and drink or medicine industry is carbon neutral. And lastly, it's also possible to generate a huge range of valuable biomaterials and biochemicals from what we refer to as waste resources. So when we take all these benefits together, biogas becomes, in fact, a carbon negative technology. And all in all, it really is the win-win-win-win technology that Niklas Svenningsson referred to, Niklas Svenningsson from the UNFCCC referred to at our World Biogas Summit a few years ago. Today, I'm going to focus on the specific kind of organic waste that we all know too well and have talked about today, food waste. When you look at the data, it's clear that food waste is a huge problem. Every year, the world produces an estimated 931 million tons of post-farm gate food wastes, the biggest proportion coming from households, followed by food service, such as restaurants, and finally retail, which still represents 13%. Simply recycling all this food waste alone would deliver 13% of the Global Methane Pledge. Obviously, the first thing we need to do is to reduce it. On top of that, the WWF estimates that over 15% of all food produced globally is lost at the farm stage. That's due to many reasons, such as market conditions, poor infrastructure, disease, pests, natural disasters, and the kind of weather events that we've already heard about this afternoon. By taking into account all on-farm food waste, the WWF estimates that as much as 40% of all food produced and purchased is wasted. That's 10% higher than previously thought. Now, the impact of food waste is also long-lasting. When food waste is sent to landfill, it can take years to break down, and its impact accumulates as more waste is piled on top. Organic waste thrown away as far back as 75 years ago continue to emit methane, showing that the impact that poor management of food waste continues to have on our climate, both now and into the future. So food waste needs to be diverted immediately to reduce emissions, not just next year, but for years to come. UNEP has recognized that biogas is one of the readily available technologies that can deliver methane emissions reduction at low cost, especially in the waste sector. But let's look first at just how significant that potential is. If we were to recycle all the readily available organic waste through biogas, our own modelling shows that this can deliver almost 50%, a half of the Global Methane Pledge. Now, obviously, we don't expect all of those organic wastes to be recycled through biogas, but I think that shows very clearly the potential that we have to make a really enormous impact. So in brief, recycling organic waste through biogas is, as we've highlighted, a circular solution that can significantly reduce methane emissions reduction and can also deliver enough green energy to displace 1/3 of today's global gas demand. It can reduce total greenhouse gas savings by over 10%. And one of the most important things also to highlight is this is an enormous economic opportunity, with the biogas market expected to grow to over $130 billion by 2033, and able to create something like 10 to 15 million new jobs globally if we're able to deliver all of that potential. It will also make significant improvement in global health outcomes, for instance, being a source of clean cooking and avoiding the contamination of drinking water. Critically, when waste becomes a resource, we start to see very little waste. Biogas can help deliver the Global Methane Pledge from farm to fork and back again. It's tomorrow's technology here today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Charlotte, for excellent presentation, for highlighting that only 2% of organic waste is being treated as of now. It has huge potential when we really look at the rest of 98% organic waste, which is there produced by humans every year. And like Carlos and others mentioned, that from 2.2 billion plus now waste being generated, we will cross almost 3.8 billion by 2050. So there's a huge potential. And thank you, Charlotte, for really connecting the dots there with energy, environment, economy, and health when we talk about anaerobic digestion along with biogas production, which is, of course, part of anaerobic digestion process itself. So this is very important that if we want to achieve Global Methane Pledge to reduce 30% methane by 2030, biogas and waste management, both together, will play a very important role if we want to achieve that. In fact, Charlotte is always very open to say there's no net zero without biogas. And that's what we believe in now, that biogas is one of the fulcrum, anaerobic digestion, linking to energy, economy, health, and of course, environment. Now, I'm coming to our last but very important panelist, our dear colleague, Robert Dasevich. He's from Vice President of Integrated Utilities at GHG. He is an innovation leader for future energy. Of course, he focuses his efforts on transition energy systems towards a low-carbon future. Like Martina mentioned right in the beginning, that this is what we want to look at, low-carbon transition and decarbonization. Waste management will play a very important role. Robert is a recognized leader for his effectiveness in driving market growth through business-level strategies, planning, and partnerships. Robert, you have been involved in this whole roadmap, of course, on renewables, on waste management, and of course, on RNG. Tell me, and of course, share your knowledge with colleagues present here, that since potential of amount of RNG, renewable and natural gas, is finite, and given the low carbon intensity of biomethane, where do you see the best application of RNG now or in near future? Please go ahead. Over.
Thank you. Just waiting for the slides to come up. Thank you very much. Sometimes I really have to pinch myself. 24 hours ago, I was shoveling snow. Today, I'm trying to figure out how to stay cool. So, strange world. Really humbled to be part of this esteemed panel and a discussion that we're having today. GHD is a global professional services organization with deep engineering roots as in energy, water, and communities. Today I have a pleasure of sharing a story about one of our esteemed clients, City of Toronto, and their long-term vision on how they achieve their circular economy journey with renewable natural gas. In the next 10 minutes, what I hope to share with you is why did they do this? How did they do this? How was it all made possible, and the results that they've achieved so far, and the view that they have moving forward into the future. For those that aren't familiar with the area of Toronto or Ontario, Canada, Toronto is the biggest city in Canada with over 6 million people and constantly growing. And their journey started when, a few years back, most cities in Canada were declaring climate emergencies. City of Toronto followed that suit and also declared an emergency in terms of their emissions and climate change. And they were guided by a strategy developed by Transform Toronto. And what you see here is they wanted to achieve a closed-loop approach to managing their organic waste. And they have done that. It didn't happen overnight. This is a long-term vision, and it's generational. And what I mean by generational, it's the fact that it survived multiple leaders as they moved through that organization to make sure that the journey started back in 2002 continues to this day. And that's the important factor in this discussion, because managing organics, putting all of the pieces in motion to be able to achieve this takes time. You have to establish a program to collect that organic waste. You have to establish a program that after collection, that waste is managed, processed, and then the energy that's generated from it has an opportunity to go somewhere. And for City of Toronto, they were very clear on the direction they gave an organization like ours. They wanted us to follow a basic principle of social, environmental, and economic triple bottom line approach to these projects. And certainly social means us. We need to be engaged in separating our organics, putting them into the green bin, making sure that it's find its way to the street every week. The environmental impact is quite obvious. We talked about that today, so I won't talk about it again. And then finally, there has to be a balanced approach to the economics of these projects. They have to stand on their own without the support of programs or funding or incentives, although those are really appreciated. The way City of Toronto approached this was to design a program that did not depend and rely on those incentives. So it started with the Green Bin program, then it went on to demonstration facility, which was the Dufferin facility. And along the way, City of Toronto wanted to create a demand for this renewable resource, so they started to also convert their trucks that pick up that garbage to compressed natural gas that would be ready in the future to receive renewable natural gas. And today, we are very much in adoption phase. Second facility is being converted to generate renewable natural gas. Third facility is in design as we speak, and they will have to tackle the landfill because over a whole bunch of years, they've been filling that with organics as well. So we're looking at ways of capturing that landfill gas and also making RNG from it. This is all possible because we are fortunate enough to live in an area of Canada where we are very well integrated and have a great infrastructure in place to be able to accommodate renewable natural gas and put it into a pipeline system that allows us to deliver that renewable natural gas to buildings, city-owned properties, as well as to vehicles. So there is optionality that City of Toronto has developed. I won't talk about this because I think it's been covered well enough today, but the process of making biogas and upgrading it is no longer a commercial challenge, nor is it a technical challenge necessarily. We are doing this today. So how did the city do? They're doing extremely well. As you can see, they're generating significant amount of energy. So City of Toronto, for their own purposes, consumes about 50 million cubic meters of natural gas, fossil natural gas today. With just these two projects, they're able to displace 16% of that fossil energy, which is not trivial. And when the third facility comes online, that will double to 30%, keeping in mind that renewable natural gas has a carbon intensity of very low carbon intensity or negative carbon intensity. So even displacing 30% of fossil natural gas with RNG has a much bigger impact or multiplying impact by the fact that it's got such low carbon intensity. What's on the horizon for City of Toronto? Well, lots. They're still proceeding and moving forward. So next step will be to figure out how do we increase and optimize the amount of RNG that can be produced through anaerobic digestion. And there's some great ideas that our technical experts and scientists are coming up with on how to increase yields. As I said, they will be looking to capture some landfill gas to make sure that those emissions are not just destroyed as they are today through flaring, but are actually consumed as a valuable resource. We haven't touched wastewater treatment facilities to produce extra renewable natural gas yet, but they're already using the energy biomethane or untreated methane to self-power and self-produce energy. And then finally, we're exploring how hydrogen and CO2 can further improve and increase the yields that we will generate through this process. Thank you very much, and I look forward to maybe answering that question.
Thank you so much, Robert. Very impactful presentation. You rightly mentioned triple bottom line, managing social, environmental, and economic impact of dealing with waste management. Of course, I was so happy to see when you put anaerobic digestion and hydrogen diagonally linking to, of course, landfills and of waste management plants. And this is how in cities like Toronto and others in Canada and rest of the world, we can really learn as a best practice model, looking at integrated approaches and utility connected. I think these are the key words you used. I was so happy that you highlighted so well. And of course, when you say what next, and that's where we'll have the question answer with the audience present here. Colleagues, we had excellent presentations by 6 panelists. We have next 20 to 25 minutes. We should end by 6:15 p.m. So I will now open the floor. I would like to keep it very interactive. My request to all audience present here is whatever questions they have, please raise your hand, acknowledge, recognize yourself, and if you have a question for a particular panelist, name it, or it can be open to for any panelist. And of course, since it is being webcast, I'll be requesting if there is some questions from our colleagues who have joined on the web, if they have any questions, some of them will take up today. And because we have very esteemed panelists present here with their experience, we'd like to address and give their overview how we can link waste management with anaerobic digestion to, of course, making biogas for energy transition, clean energy, waste management, health impact, and above all, we are talking about GHG emissions reduction, methane, Global Methane Pledge, how to meet it by 30% reduction by 2030. So now, colleagues, floor is open. Please be brief. I will take first from there, of course, and then we come here. I can recognize 4 names. Yes, please. You have the mic with you. Please.
I've got the mic, so I get to go first.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks. I'm from London, Ontario, so I have to ask the Toronto guy the question. So thank you for that. That was really great to have a case study of how you diverted organics and turned it into renewable natural gas in Toronto. I work for an organization called Delterra, which is trying to solve organics business cases in global south countries. And I was curious about how did you come up with the funding for that? What was the investment imperative? Who provided the funding? What was the business case that eventually convinced, whether it was the provincial government or the city government or both, to invest in this project? And can you talk about how you got the finances to work to make it happen? Thanks.
Maybe I'll request the lady in the front. You have raised the hand. We have a second question from that side. Can you give the mic to her, please? And then after these 2 questions are answered, then we come this side, please. If you have your question, to any panelists, please ask.
My name is Letícia. I'm from Brazil. I'm a reporter. My question is around the reduction of production. As the health system says that the first thing doctors must do is not to harm. In order to not to harm, we have to eliminate fossil fuels. The same thing happens to waste. So the first thing about handling waste is not to generate it. How do we incorporate it into the company's set of mind? Making them understand they have to, I don't know, produce less, trying to work with the recycling or reusing sectors in order to reach this goal of really reducing the production of everything. And kind of doubling the question, how do we handle food waste, thinking that our systems are now really global. So we have globalization in food. We import and export food around the world. So is localization the main answer to solve waste on food?
The first question, Robert, you would like to answer. Then second question, Carlos, it's towards to you, and maybe Charlotte and others can also join. Robert, first question, please. Mike, please.
Number 6, I think. Thank you. It's an amazing question, and I'm glad you asked it, because this requires partnerships unlike the ones that we have today. And that's what Toronto did. There was an interesting approach that Toronto took. They partnered with a gas utility, Enbridge in this case, to build this project together. So part of that came from City of Toronto making that decision and setting aside a budget to build these facilities early on and start that process. So it wasn't all built overnight. They were able to stretch the timeline to be able to construct the facilities needed to process the organics in 2002. And then it came down to an interesting partnership where Enbridge was willing to come forward and actually support the projects by advancing funding at a utility rate, a reduced rate. And when you asked the funding questions, I wanted to go to the fact that there was a time in Ontario where there was funding available for projects like this that unfortunately disappeared. So, and this is very important. Finding commercial value to projects like this should never be built on funding that can come from somewhere, because that funding, just as easily as it becomes available, it can disappear. And if that entire project was started and partially constructed when the funding either disappears or it doesn't materialize the way we had hoped, then we have projects that either fail to perform, stall altogether, or are canceled. So from the very beginning, these projects that the City of Toronto is developing are not dependent on external funding, but are self-funded in creative partnerships. And the second piece to this is that the City of Toronto, given how much energy they consume, they can socialize the cost of that incremental additional cost of that RNG. They can socialize that cost and spread it across all of their properties. So the incremental cost per unit of energy that they're purchasing or consuming isn't all that great when you divide it into such large amount of energy that they're purchasing.
Very much, Robert, for highlighting that very clearly about how the business model should be looked at without any external funding for sustainability issues. Carlos, could I request you to address the second question from colleague from Brazil, please?
Thank you very much. I must apologize for my voice. As I mentioned, we came here with this, but to maximize the voice of the waste and the resources management sector. So I will start with myself maximizing my voice for the coming days. So thank you, Leticia, for the very interesting question, and I'm happy to address, because there is no single answer. We really need to change the way of thinking about everything. It's not only on the waste sector, because if we want to reduce the waste generation, if we want to prevent waste generation, it starts with the design phase. It starts with the manufacturing phase. It starts with the way we distribute and, let's say, export products. And then the waste sector is dealing with the remainings. But what we really believe is that for this change happen, we need that the waste sector is at the center of the whole value chain. Because if we want to prevent waste, we, the waste managers, we, the waste operators, we know how to assist in the design phase so the remainings are less at the ending. We know how to assist in the manufacturing phase on how to assemble better the products, on how to use better materials that can be recycled at the end. For example, some months ago, I understood visiting a e-waste facility in Brazil that all these plastics from monitors are not recyclable because they have a flame retardant, because of a regulation that requires the manufacturers to use the flame retardant in these products. And when you mix this substance to plastic, you cannot recycle it. So how do we change the whole process? And it's what we are, let's say, supporting from ISVA, the transition towards a circular economy, because the business as usual model is exhausted. But transition to circular economy is not only recycling, is not only having dealing on what we have. It's really dealing with the whole value chain. So this is the change that is needed to prevent waste. We are developing a research together with UNEP IETC. It's the International Environment Technology Center. From UNEP, it's the office dedicated to waste management. And we are developing this research to analyze how much waste the society can reduce from now to 2050. Because we cannot reduce everything. There will always be some waste, some remainings, because we would need a huge investment to change the whole manufacturing process. So this is one part. The second question related to food waste, this is very interesting because we lack on data. What is really food waste and what is food wastage? This is the difference. And we, like, let's say, citizens, we really don't know how to separate it, how to identify. And again, ISVA is developing a research. We just finished this research in Rio de Janeiro, the first city, commissioned by UNEP. That there will be the food waste report launch in the coming days, the 2023 food waste report. We'll be there participating and following, and we are providing data, accurate data, on what is food waste and what's food wastage. So we did this research in Rio de Janeiro. Now we have been commissioned to expand to 3 other cities in Brazil. There is one similar research developed in Serbia from our national member in Serbia. So this is the way we are moving, to really engage citizens to identify what is food waste and what's food wastage. Thank you.
So much, Carlos, for highlighting. Especially, I really liked your initial comment, giving global voice to waste management. And that's what this event is all about. Martina, if you'd like to add here on this question, please. Can you please put on the mic here?
Thank you. No, not yet. Yes. Now, thank you very much. I just wanted to briefly come in as well and to complement on the very first question. Obviously, design and production, the behavior is very much as well up to us what kinds of products we're purchasing, and we do have more of a leeway in that than we might think we have. The policies were mentioned, really important to give the right sort of triggers. Extended producer responsibility is key in that, to really create a market incentive with that, and obviously fiscal policies, and I wanted to hold that thought. A second point that I wanted to introduce, and the more obviously we become circular, we have to keep in mind the feedback loops, some of the negative feedback loops that we could actually create by doing that. So we have to be 2 steps ahead of what could come, in a sense, to preempt, that we're not creating a loophole that then, oh my God, we've just created a new problem, right? And that means if waste becomes an attractive resource, that we're not starting to create more waste because it's an attractive resource. I mean, just to state the obvious. But I think we can do that, but we just have to plan ahead a little more. There is, I had something on the jobs that I wanted to say. I just put down jobs, but that was, it's really about how do we create incentives for the private sector to come in on that as well. I think that's probably what I leave it at. And I wanted to come in on the food waste issue, because indeed there will be the food waste index that will be the second version of it will be launched well, actually not this week, but we'll get a pre-glimpse this week of it. And the first time we did it was to help put the finger on the data and to show how big the problem is and so on. And the first thing was, it's a problem everywhere. It's not only a rich world problem, it's a problem everywhere. The reasons why it's a problem everywhere are different. Some case it is because there's not sufficient access to cold chain. So obviously if you don't have stable supply of electricity, well, your fridge, I mean, what is in the fridge may actually go to waste. And so it's not voluntary, but it so happens that. So there's a whole range of other things that are behind. So it's important to look at why it happens. It's important what it is, and we heard that already. There's differences in a lot of the developing countries. Food is cooked much more from scratch. So that means you have automatically more waste, but it's actually not food, but it's what you're not going to eat. That could be composted, obviously. There's a cultural thing in that as well. What in some places is considered food waste, I mean, not food waste, but a waste, is in other places totally edible. So there's something that needs to play in there as well. So that's why it's really important to look into depth into that. And there's a number of ways to do that. One is actually really opening up the bins and look into how is this composed and so on, to help then identify the right levers to act on it. But also with some of the typologies that are being built so that we don't have to open everything individually. You asked the question whether local food production is the solution. There is no silver bullet to anything. So that also is not a silver bullet. But the more we have recourse to different solutions, the better we are positioned in a sense. It's like the ecosystem. It's never one track, but several. And if there's a complement, we've been working as well on urban food systems, for example, urban farming. That's really interesting because if you have your food waste and then it's composted and you have it right there, you could actually make a very nice sort of loop without having to transport things very far distances. Obviously, this will not solve the food security crisis either. We will not be able to produce as much in that sort of context, but it's a very good complement for certain foods that are more perishable and so on. So there's a whole link to that. So it's not a silver bullet, it's not the solution, but it's part of the solutions to be a bit more local and a bit more seasonal. So there's a whole behavioral issue right behind that as well. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Martina, for adding your comments to this very important topic about how to reduce food waste and what are the ways to look at lifestyle changes. Now we come to this side. We'll have only 2 questions. I'm sorry, there's a time permitting. So first we give it the lady. Yes. Yeah. Yes, same. So maybe the second. Yes. And one more. But only please be brief because time is there so that panelists can react.
What I would want to understand is this transition between renewable and fossil natural gas. Specifically, there's so much leakage in the fossil natural gas in urban settings, harming the urban canopy. Yet what you've suggested is that renewable natural gas is a drop-in solution. So then how do we make this technical transition between the fossil natural gas and the renewable natural gas while this infrastructure, which is leaking methane, is in place? This is a very technical problem, I understand, but it's also a political and economic issue.
Thank you. The second, I think so, Robert, you and other colleague can do it. Yes, please.
Yeah, thank you so much for the wonderful panel. It was really nice to be hearing all these initiatives. I represent an environmental NGO, and I wanted to ask for anybody on the panel who wants to answer. Also referring to what the lady in the first row from Brazil was saying, as in we need to be stopping the harm from happening in the first place. And so considering that agriculture, but especially animal agriculture, causes such a tremendous amount of waste and methane emissions, have any of you or your countries or your initiatives considered diet change towards a mostly or plant-based diets as one of the main solutions? Thank you.
Thank you so much for your brief questions. I'll request Robert, and then of course I'll request Charlotte and Mr. Abraham if they have something to add because they have not spoken on the second line. Robert, over to you. We have only 10 minutes, so we have to give brief replies, but we continue our discussion after the session is over also. Yes, Robert.
If you thought I was speaking fast before, watch out. Thank you for that question. it's a consideration as to what do we do about our systems that are in place today. We have a lot of infrastructure, underground pipeline infrastructure. And depending on jurisdictions and regions, there are various regulations that manage that pipeline system not to be leaky, and replacing cast iron and some other strategies to make that system less susceptible to leakage is very important. But it sort of goes beyond that, because if you consider RNG as a finite resource, and we don't have much of it to make, as we discussed, directing that finite resource to the best applications, the most difficult to decarbonize sectors, is the real opportunity. And I personally believe, I think there might be debates on this issue, that directing RNG to the transportation sector, replacing diesel, which is very difficult to displace in the heavy-duty sector, is probably the greatest opportunity RNG holds today. You can make a vehicle net neutral or negative just with some RNG. You don't even have to displace all of it, but delivering RNG directly from a source production to the consumption, avoiding the pipelines, also avoids the methane leaks that are associated with leaky systems. So if the future ultimately leads us towards the best application for RNG, it needs to go to those sectors that can directly receive that RNG without the opportunity for leakage. I'm sure I'm not answering it completely, but would love to take this conversation on after.
Thank you, Robert. Abraham, would you like to add something, Charlotte? Yeah. Yes, please continue.
Yes, thank you. Oh, yeah, regarding to the last point from we are doing in Mexico, and thank you for your question, because here is the Martina Otto, and the next support for the projects will be in the waste and in the terms of agriculture, because we have a lot of emissions from methane from that the sources. We talked the last time actually in Paris with colleagues from Brazil, that they are doing a lot of work in terms of that kind of emissions. So the idea is work with them together and bring this kind of technologies and the kind of the dietary that they doing in Brazil specifically. So because if we are working with the satellite information, and we saw in many of the agriculture zones, there are a lot of emissions of methanes, because we are not monitoring in the ground, but now with the satellites we can find exactly way that they are emitted. So now the idea is integrate that measurements with the strategies to decrease the emissions from that activity. That's it from Mexico.
Charlotte, would you like to say a few moments, anything at the closing remarks from your side on the topics being raised here?
Is the mic on? Yes, great. I think there was one observation I'd like to just make around the fact that we're focused on, or we need to recycle the 98% of organic waste that we're not recycling today. So just to talk a little bit about some of the work that we're doing that I hope will help get more of those organic wastes recycled through biogas, and reflecting the comments that you made, Robert, about the challenges of getting the economic equation to stack up, and answering your question as well. One of the challenges about biogas, and indeed any circular economy technology, is the fact that it is circular economy, and therefore it involves getting stakeholders together across sectors that don't normally talk to each other, and in addition getting the economics to stack up. One of the things that we are doing, which also addresses the methane leakage question, is developing a suite of biogas regulations that would be effectively available, standardized regulations that could be available for any country to implement and download, as well as international standards for the design, build and operation of plants that would also be linked to biomethane certificates, which can be monetized. That these standards would also ensure that the operators of biogas plants are incentivized, financially incentivized to manage methane within their own systems, to minimize those. And the really good operators are able to keep them to a very, very tiny level. So just in summary, having a biogas framework and international AD certification scheme would both make the design, build and operation of plants so much faster and safer and speed things up rapidly, which is what we need to do. If we think about the deadline for the Global Methane Pledge is 2030, it's 6 years away. We need to build hundreds of thousands of plants really fast to make that happen. And that includes addressing the delays around planning and permitting. So the more we can standardize the whole regulatory system and standards, the better. And that's something that the World Biogas Association is working on, and thanks also to the Global Methane Hub for supporting that work financially.
Thank you so much, Charlotte, for really highlighting the point at how biogas production and use utilization can bring the waste management, resource management both together and break the silos. Colleagues, friends, we are coming to the end of this very important session. I hope you enjoyed it also, like everyone else. I just try to sum up in 5 points as a takeaways for all group present here. First, it's time when we look at the waste management and methane pledge, breaking the silos between waste management, resource management, biogas, and of course, from linear to circular economy. Second, connecting the dots, energy, environment, health, and economy. That's where waste management, sustainable management can really help. Third, lifestyle changes. It was mentioned by Carlos and other colleagues very clearly that we have to follow sustainable production and consumption patterns if we really want to really reduce waste at every level along the value chain. Fourth, we need business models, commercial models without external funding for sustainability in long run. And there we need some targeted financing. I'll be very happy that maybe this COP or subsequent COP, we have a global fund to really handle waste, biogas, and resource management issues together, like that is a topic, because this is a very crucial for providing solution to achieve net zero and nature positive planet. And fifth, not the least, associations, collaborations, coalitions, and partnerships are the key if we want to have zero waste planet. And on partnership, I always recall a very famous African saying, alone we go fast, together we go far. So with these words, I feel that sums up our spirit of this session. Thank you so much. Please join me in giving a round of applause to our eminent panelists. And also a round of applause to a wonderful audience we had today. Thank you so much for joining us.